We have some breaking news right now on ABC News Live reports. Sources are telling ABC News that a grand jury has in fact indicted ex-FBI Director James Comey. The effort was led by President Trump's newly appointed U.S. Attorney in Virginia, Linsey Davis. Prosecutors earlier said that they couldn't establish a probable cause to charge Comey. For more, I want to bring in our ABC News Washington Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Faulders. Catherine, thank you for being here with us. So first of all, how many counts were sought here by the prosecution? How many was he indicted on?
So we're learning that 3 counts were sought here by the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Linsey Davis. And we're told by sources that the grand jury indicted on 2 of those 3 counts that she was seeking. One of those counts is false statements, presumably to Congress, given that this is what this investigation centered on. The second was an obstruction charge. That's all we know right now. But we do know that a grand jury did return at least 2 counts of the 3 that was presented to them. And just to break this down for you, as you mentioned, that memo that we reported on, that declination of charges memo is what it's called. The career prosecutors recommending that the U.S. attorney not go to the grand jury and seek these charges. The grand jury essentially agreed with the government that the government proved probable cause here. But that doesn't mean that they reach this higher standard, right, beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what they will have to obviously prove at trial. So it's a lower standard, but does mean that there are 12 grand jurors, and 12 of those grand jurors all unanimously agreed to indict the former FBI director on 2 counts. One of false statements and the second of obstruction. Now, we haven't heard anything from the president yet. We are seeing a tweet from the attorney general acknowledging an indictment without a name attached to it. Presumably, that would be acknowledging the indictment that we're reporting on through sources here. We haven't heard from Comey's lawyer yet on this. We've reached out to him, and we haven't heard directly from any Department of Justice spokespeople specifically on the news that we're reporting on Comey. I can imagine that the president will weigh in on this soon. He does talk to his attorney general quite often. I would imagine that the two most likely have spoken and that he is aware of this, given the attorney general's latest public post on X.
No question. The president seemingly trying to distance himself from this a bit earlier today. But in terms of how we got here, Catherine, and you're talking about being indicted on 2 of 3 charges, false statements and obstruction here. Does this all stem from this 2020 interview, essentially, with the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Yeah, it does. It stems from Comey's September 2020 testimony before Congress when he was testifying mainly about the Trump campaign, the first Trump campaign's alleged ties with Russia. There were allegations that prosecutors were trying to tie here that he made false statements about knowledge of particular documents, that he wasn't truthful, for example, on authorizing leaks to Congress. Now, those were 2 of the false statements they were investigating. I should note that they have indicted on 1 false statement, and they chose not to indict on a second false statement. We don't know which ones those are. So we don't know which statement that the grand jury believed and agreed with the government beyond proved probable cause that Comey did, in fact, commit perjury during that testimony before the Senate in 2020. So that still is to be determined. Perhaps they unseal this indictment. Typically in the Eastern District of Virginia, given that they handle such sensitive cases, those indictments are returned under seal, meaning that we can't see them. I can imagine in a case that is so high profile like this, they may release it publicly, and surely they will also have to alert Comey's lawyer to this news as well.
Well, and Catherine, you had warned us that this would move very quickly. Of course, I think a lot of eyes were on Tuesday when the statute of limitations on this would run out. But also, Linsey Davis's only been in this position for a few days as well. It was quite the about face in just getting her there. Yeah, her first day, Kana, was on Monday. So she literally just came into this office. And one of the first things that happened when she came into this office was that she was advised not to indict. So this is one of her first actions, and it clearly does seem like a direction from President Trump. It certainly does. Catherine Faulders, excellent reporting by you and your team on this. Thank you so much for spending some time here with us today. I also want to bring in our ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney, Shauna Lloyd. Shauna Lloyd, I want to touch on a couple of things here with you. First and foremost, the probable cause versus the beyond a reasonable doubt, as Catherine touched on there. That's ultimately what they will have to prove here, and now indicting him on 2 of 3 counts.
Absolutely, Kana. So what we have to remember is the grand jury hears from the U.S. state attorney. They present their case. There is not a defense. So it's a lower standard. When we actually go to trial, that is going to be proof beyond reasonable doubt. And so it is a much higher standard. And that is something that the jury can find differently, even though the grand jury found that there was enough probable cause to move forward with the indictment. The indictment is simply the beginning of this process.
And what a beginning it certainly is. You also heard Catherine note here that the prosecution was actually seeking 3 charges here, 2 charges of false statements and 1 of obstruction. And they decided to indict him on 2 false statements and obstruction, but chose not to indict him on a second false statement. How do you read into that?
So essentially what they're saying is that for the whatever statements that were given, they did not find enough probable cause related to that specifically. We don't know exactly which statements we were. Typically, grand jury proceedings are within secrecy. They are not typically, we won't know until we actually see the information filed and we actually know what the charges are. Then we'll know which statements this is corroborating with the charges.
All right, Shauna Lloyd, our thanks to you. Ultimately, reaction will start pouring in here momentarily. I'm Kana Whitworth. Thank you for joining us. We'll have a lot more on ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis. That's coming up after a quick break. Stay with us.